Hi guys, how you doing? This is 1-bit, and we're back for a review of BioShock Infinite. Now let me start this off by telling you there's going to be two versions of this review. There's going to be the spoiler-free version, and then within the same video I'm going to do a spoiler-rich version. I'm going to have a very clear cutoff point between these two versions where I'm going to let you know that if you continue listening, you're going to hear plot spoilers, and you're going to hear the ending of the game. You're going to hear a very detailed reasoning as to why there were issues with the story, and there are issues with the story. There's undeniable issues with the stories, and there's some gaping plot holes here. But I'm going to give you a very clear cutoff point where you can just stop listening and be completely oblivious and play and experience the game. Let me start out by saying also that this is not going to be a digit score review. That's not the type of reviews that I'm going to give. My feeling on this is that there are a lot of different reviewers that are out there. There are a lot of respected sources that exist. And if what you want is a number to quantify the video or the game itself, it's not that it does a disservice to the game, because I think those are important things, but there's a lot of resources where you can get that already. My whole concept is that I want to offer something that some other group doesn't offer. And what I mean by that is, you can go to IGN, you could go to, the multiple different sources, PC Gamer or, GameSpot or what have you, and get a number score to tell you how good or what this game should be. But ultimately, it just gets thrown as like a label. Like a lot of times games stick it on the cover of their game, and then that's all that you have there, as opposed to actually having to listen to what the reviewer is saying and get a kind of deeper understanding of the nuances of the game. So ultimately, I'm not going to give a label. I'm not going to give something that somebody can just slap somewhere and say that this is the overarching opinion. But I'm going to be very fair, and I'm going to go through and discuss the game. And at the end, I'm going to tell you if you should go out and buy the game now, or if you should wait to buy the game. Now, my ultimate decision making when it comes to that kind of thing is, right now BioShock Infinite is a $60 PC game. Okay, I have no idea what it is for the consoles. If you're on the consoles and it's a different price or it's slightly less, then good for you. But I'm dealing with the PC and the PC only, because that's the version I played. I never played the console version. So if you're looking for a console review of the game, I'm not here to provide it for you. So let me be very clear. This is the PC review of BioShock Infinite. And on the PC, it is a $59.99 game. So that stated, should you go out and buy it for $60, or should you wait until it's cheaper? And that is what I'm ultimately going to tell you at the end of my review. I'm going to tell you how I feel the game measures up, and should you go out and buy it right away, or should you wait? Okay? Now, I'm going to start off, and this is going to be the spoiler-free part of the review. BioShock Infinite is it's a really I have conflicted feelings about it, because as far as a game, if you're just dealing with gameplay, I'm an old school gamer. I come from the days of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I even had a Game Boy and things like that, and I can remember all the way back going over to my friend's house and playing their Atari. So, when you compare this as a technical achievement on that level, when you're looking at things like Pong to this, obviously this is an amazing technical achievement. The graphics that they've created. I mean, just looking at this title screen, and you see the leaves on the ivy that's coming up the side of this building, and how they're waving in the breeze, or the flags, the way they're waving in the breeze, and things like that, or the water that's running down the streets. You can see that it's amazing graphically, and then they have all these little details. Like, you can even hear now on this title screen the little birds chirping in the background, the way the music is. You see all the little pieces of paper and the leaves that are falling, and that's just the title screen. And all throughout your experience of playing through this game, you're going to see sights and hear sounds that really make you marvel, that really like leave you breathless as you're playing this game. So definitely in the graphics department, it's an amazing technical achievement. When it comes to the sound and the sound effects and the different things that are going on in the game, amazing, great. You know, I would say, you know, certainly, you know, I'm not an expert when it comes to the sound and the Foley work and things like that, but as far as my layman's ears go, I think it was a great experience in that department as well. When it comes to the actual gameplay of the game, there are some slight issues there. I think it is overall a good play experience. Myself, I did experience a bug where I was going through an area, and they have this option where if you want to pick up things in the environment, you can select something through the menus that makes it flash. And I thought I saw something that flashed on top of it was like a shelf of safety deposit boxes, and I tried to jump up to grab it, but nothing was there. But then I got stuck, and I just was stuck in the corner, and I tried all kinds of jumping and moving and turning, and I couldn't get out of it. So there are some bugs in the game. That's the one that I found. It's entirely possible that people might find more, but it's also completely understandable that those kind of things happen. And I was able to reset. I did lose a little bit of my playthrough, but not too much. And that's the one and only bug that I encountered. But there are some bugs in the game. They do exist, okay? But other than that one bug, I didn't really experience anything. I didn't have any screen tearing or anything. I did have some slowdown, but I believe the slowdown was directly related to the fact that I was uploading some things on YouTube in the background while I was playing the game. And the mere fact that I was able to, on a GTX 590 card, max all the settings and play through the game on max settings was, you know, I think brilliant, because that's not the current generation's card. I think we're up to Titan level now, you know, or the 600 series. And I think those are the suggested cards. I'm not 100% sure exactly what their suggested cards are. I could check it on Steam, but I can't right now that I have the video started. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a very pleasant experience for the eyes. But the issue that I was having with the gameplay, bugs aside, was originally when I played the game, I thought that they were going to have more of a free roaming aspect to the game. Now, if you're a fan of the original BioShock, you know that it wasn't a free roaming game. It was pretty linear in the way that it was constructed. You had to go and travel. You were traveling throughout this city, excuse me, but you have various paths that you're going down, and you do have to do some backtracking and things, but it's never actually like an open world. You never actually get to travel to any part that you want to and experience it with the tool set that you have. And I thought that they were going to go like full Metroid with this one. I thought that the way that they were going to go with it is that you're going to be able to go in and, you know, explore at your leisure and go to whatever part of the city that you wanted to, and then once you got new tools and new plasmids and new abilities, then you could explore and go back and explore different parts. And to a certain extent, it is that way. There are a few things that you can find. There's a few areas that you can go into and experience that you couldn't if you didn't have the skyhook or certain abilities in the game. But for the most part, it's a branch path. It's like, if I go to the right, I'm going to progress the story. If I go to the left, maybe I'm going to find some goodies. So in that sense, it was pretty linear. And also, when you're fighting the enemies, they didn't have straight up what I would consider monster lockers. And what I mean by the term monster lockers, it comes from usually like dungeon crawlers, where they would literally have an area. And I think there's one game in particular that has it. I can't remember its name, but it would actually have a area. It's usually in arcade games. They would have them where it would be like a little, like a tunnel or a cave or something, and all the monsters would pour out of that cave, and then you would have to fight the monsters in the area, fight them, but they would just infinitely spawn until you got to the cave and you broke the cave, and then now no more monsters would spawn in that area. It's not exactly like that. It's more of a zone structure. So you walk into a room, there are enemies in the room. You have, you know, all your plasmids that you can use in whatever style that you want. You can create your own playthrough style, which I did myself, and you fight those challenges in that room the way you see fit. After you kill all the challenges in that room, you then can move down to the next hallway or the next room, and then you continue on like that. And sometimes when you're coming back to an area, maybe it'll have a new spawn, or more enemies will have respawned in the area if you have to backtrack through it. But for the most part, once you clear an area, it's devoid of enemies, unless you actually have a mission structure that makes you come back through the area. So it's just kind of by the numbers, and it's like you have the ability to build up your own kind of arsenal, and you know, with both the weapons that did exist in the game, and there's a vast variety of guns and different types of guns, like guns that you couldn't even classify as guns, because they can shoot fire, and they can, you know, they have like an arc to them and things like that. Or you have the RPG launcher and all this stuff that shouldn't have existed in the 1900s. But all of these different things that you can make, but you can only hold 2 weapons at a time. So it makes you choose what you want. You can have all your plasmids, but you can only hold 2 weapons at a time. So you can kind of make up your own playstyle and experience it in your own way, but it doesn't give you the opportunity to really play it in a different way. Meaning, like, they don't have any stealth gameplay options. They don't have any execute options. They don't have the ability to circumnavigate an area by, you know, doing it at you know, but basically no stealth gameplay exists within the world. So I'm just kind of disappointed in that. I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that they didn't give you a true open world, that it was very linear. It was like, go to this point, go to that point. It did have branching paths that had a few goodies down the side corridors, but other than that, for the most part, it's a straight run through the game. So gameplay wise, I think there's room for improvement, but I don't think it's a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I would say it's a fun, enjoyable experience overall. Also, the AI on the enemies, it ranges from, I played the game on hard, so I ranged from, like, I believe my first 2 playthroughs, I didn't even die on them, like, and I made it almost halfway through the game. And then it was after that point, after the halfway point, that I ran into a few fights that were more difficult, and I started dying. And then, like, I believe probably the hardest enemies that you fight, and I mean, you meet the handyman pretty early in the game, but I would say the handyman can be difficult on hard. And certainly if you have to fight multiples of enemies, or multiple gunships and things like that, things can get complicated. Like when you have to deal with, say, maybe a handyman or fireman or multiple patriots and things like that, things can get complicated in the game. But other than that, like, the enemy AI isn't all that intense. It's just like, it pops out of cover, it shoots, and then it stays out of cover. It doesn't really, it's not smart. It doesn't do, like, really smart things. It doesn't organize, and, you know, it does try to run around, and it will try to flank you, and it will try to, you know, come at you or run at you, but it doesn't really do it in a smart way. This isn't a cover shooter, and I don't think it would work as a cover shooter, because, you know, you're sitting there throwing fireballs at a wall that the thing's sitting behind. Unless they had destructible environments, it really wouldn't work that way. So I can't say it's bad. I think it's good, but I think there's some room for improvement there, to where they could have elevated how good it was. So on the gameplay, I think it's decent gameplay. I think the graphics are good, sounds good. The biggest issue I had with the game is the story. The story, point blank, when you're going through the story, it starts out and it's good, and it keeps going, and it's good, and it's good, and it's good, And then it gets to a point right around when it starts talking about when you meet the one-eyed soldier, and you meet the one-eyed soldier, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. We're just gonna call him a one-eyed soldier for this review. But when you meet him and you start kind of doing some maths in your head about that whole circumstance, and like after you get the end game reveal and everything, and also once you get a little bit further and you run into the gunsmith, and we'll just call him the gunsmith, and that whole scenario. Once those things happen, you start seeing the story kind of falling apart, and it's very complex story that I'm going to go into a very detailed explanation of as to why the story starts to fall apart. But if you don't think on it too hard, you can still suspend your disbelief and you'll be okay with the way the story ends. But if you're somebody that you're looking for, say, a high, you have the same expectations for this game that you have for any television show or any movie, and you have that same level of expectation, as opposed to, I'm an old school gamer, and like I remember when I used to play Mario Brothers just to get to the end, and they would say the princess is in the other castle. If that's all you care about is playing a great game, you're going to be completely satisfied with your purchase of this game, and it's not going to be an issue. But if you're looking for something deeper, if you want all of the ends to be wrapped up into a nice little bow at the end, you're not going to be satisfied. It's going to leave you scratching your head a bit. And again, I will explain all the timelines and everything that's going on in my spoiler-rich part of the review. So since this is a spoiler-free version, I'm just going to wrap it up right here, because we discussed the graphics, we discussed the gameplay. I think the game is a lot of fun. It does a lot more than the original BioShock did. You have like the skyhook that you're able to use and to travel along the rails, and it ends up feeling, I mean, it's a lot of fun and it's a lot exhilarating when you first do it. But because they limit your use of it to specific areas and specific parts of the map, and it doesn't, like, the whole world isn't connected with this amazing like Skyline roller coaster, it kind of limits the gameplay options. Also, the Skyline is very, very powerful, because the initial enemies that you fight, you can be on the Skyline and then skyhook off of them into a aerial strike, and you'll just one-shot kill them. And it's not till later in the game that you come into these enemies that are very, heavily armored, that now the one-shot skyhook doesn't cut it for them, and you have to do some more melee attacks or some additional weapon attacks to take them out, or plasmids or what have you. But the fact that it's like kind of in a bottle, it's not like just free roaming and all over the map, it kind of takes away from that aspect of the game. Certainly, the vigors are the same as plasmids. If you remember playing the original BioShock, the same thrill of using those is there, that exists. The weapons are, I believe, far more varied than the original. If memory serves me correctly, I don't remember them having sniper rifles or the various types of volley guns and things like that they have in this game. So there's a lot of variety, but there are I would say a limited number that are effective until you actually get some of the upgrades into the game. And then also they have the equipment that you get at some point in the game, and the equipment can help modify your character even more. And all of this are welcome changes. It's just I don't feel that they took it far enough. Again, I feel like if they took it they went full Metroid with it, it could have gotten even more interesting, and it would have provided more replay to the game, because you would have had to explore the environment, and what kind of adventures could you have gotten in when you explored, and if you had to interact with the characters in the game. And I felt like the game was a little bit too scripted. I think they should have evolved this series more towards, say, RPG elements, where I can go on missions and I can do things within the game, and I can experience, like I can interact with characters or have friendly characters that I interact with. But in this game, it's more about telling one singular narrative that unfortunately kind of jumps the shark, and as a result, you're forced on this linear path. So at the end of the day, for this part of the review, for the first part of the spoiler-free part of the review, I would have to say, as far as, again, I'm not giving a rating for the game, I would say that BioShock Infinite is a game that you should experience for yourself. You definitely should play the game. But as far as buying it at $60 for the current price of it, it's not worth buying right now. Wait for this game until later. I played the game, I put in 18 hours, I collected all the voxophones, I did all the optional side paths in the game, and experienced everything there is except for 1999 mode. I haven't gone through and played through on the 1999 mode, but I experienced all of the original content that's in the game, except for whenever they released the DLC. I already purchased the year pass, so whenever those 3 pieces of DLC come out, I'll be able to experience those, and I'll come back and I'll tell you how those were. But as far as what's on offer, this is a AAA title for $60. Looking on Steam, looking out there at the various different retailers, there are plenty of games that have AAA polish and shine that are not launching at $60. Let's be honest here. Look at the Tomb Raider franchise. This was a relaunch of a well-known franchise from the past. Its price point was in the $40 range, and the reason its price point was in the $40 range is because the franchise had started to stumble. The people didn't know if they wanted to go and buy a new Tomb Raider game, so they had to give it a more reasonable price point to appeal to the market. BioShock Infinite has the name. That is the only reason you are paying $60 for this game. This game doesn't offer you any multiplayer. It doesn't offer you any extra content except for the content that you got to go out and pay $19.99 for in order to get the year pass for it, or pay individually. I believe it's $9.99 for every piece of DLC. So unless you're actually going to pay more money, you're not really getting anything else out of this game. You're going to get that original 18 hours or however long it takes you to get through the game, and that's it. So in my estimation, is $60, is that worth 18 hours of your time? For me, no, I don't think it is. Now, for getting it on Steam, when I got it, I also got the pre-order purchase, which gave me XCOM Enemy Unknown and some Team Fortress hats and some other crap that didn't really matter. But for me, it was worth it because I got XCOM Enemy Unknown as well. And at the time, I believe that's like a $35 to $40 game right now as well. So getting both of those games together kind of brought both of the games down to about $40 each, and I think that that's a much more reasonable price. When you see BioShock for $40 or less, which I think by the holiday season, you can pick it up then. That's when you should pick it up. That's when I say unabashedly yes. You should. Everybody should play this game at some point, but for $60, is it worth it? No. Because it doesn't offer that replayability. It doesn't have a continue replay factor in there. You are going to probably want to replay it. Possibly. I'm at that point where, look, when I was raised, I used to go back, and that's all. For me, it was a monetary thing because my mother couldn't afford to buy me a bunch of games. So I would go back and play through games and play through games. But I'm at a point now where I play through on normally the hardest settings possible, experience the story, and then after I experience the story, I'm never going to touch that game again. I'm never going to go back and experience it again unless I've completely forgot the story and for some reason I want to go back and through. But even then, once you know the story, in a lot of ways, I don't have that motivation. So if you're a gamer like me, you're probably not going to want to go back and play through it again. So then it comes down to the price point. And I think in our economic conditions right now, $60 is too much for this game. It's a great game. It did a lot of things that were good, but there are also some issues again, and I'm going to go in detail with those issues in the spoiler-rich version of this review. But for those people that They wanted to know, what do I think about BioShock Infinite? Overall, I think it's a great game. I think it, you know, no game is perfect. You know, just like no people are perfect. There are some flaws there. The biggest flaws are as a result of the story and where it goes with that. But overall, I think it is a very excellent game and that everybody should experience it. So I'm going to end the spoiler-free version of this review right here. And I'm going to let you know, if you don't want the game spoiled for you, if you're not interested in hearing story spoilers, I'm going to be telling you the ending of the game. I am going to be telling you the resolution of the game, what happens, the whole timeline of the game, all the details, everything. So if you're not interested in hearing that, turn the recording off now. Turn it off now. If you don't want to know, if you don't want any secrets spoiled, because I'm going to be doing a very detailed analysis of what the issues were that I had with the game and why specifically the story didn't quite reach the level. This is more for people that have played through and experienced the game themselves. My estimation is that if you continue listening and you listen to things before you actually play through them, it's either going to ruin your desire to want to play the game anymore, or it's going to make you just, you know, kind of build it up within you that you don't like the game. And I don't want that to be your first experience. I want you to play through the game and have your own opinion, and then after you've developed your own opinion or your own mind about things, then you can come and experience what my opinion was on it. So again, spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. If you don't want any spoilers, leave and turn off the review right here. Okay. Now let's get into it. This is part 2. This is officially part 2. This is me talking about BioShock Infinite. This is going to be the spoiler-rich review. Okay. BioShock Infinite. Let me just tell you what the end of this game is first. We're going to start with the end, and then I can start doing the timeline and explain to you why the game kind of stumbled. BioShock, at the end of the game, what happens is there's the big reveal. The big reveal of the game is that you are in fact Zachary Comstock. Your character, DeWitt, is Zachary Comstock. Okay? They're the same person. But they're not exactly the same person. They are the same person, but they are the same person that is in different dimensions. Meaning, what they've created here with the BioShock universe is a multiverse. Now, if you don't know what a multiverse is, I'm going to explain what a multiverse is to you. If you've ever watched or read DC Comics or Marvel Comics, they both exist in multiverses. What that means is there are separate planets, and on each different planets there are copies of everybody that exists on those other planets. But in all of those different planets, those people have made different decisions. So there might be a planet where Superman's a good guy. There might be a planet where Superman's a bad guy. There might be a planet where he's somewhere in between, and there might be one that he doesn't even exist. Okay? And the reason that they have these multiverses, especially in comic universes, is to basically fix continuity errors. So when you have stories like, you know, the greats like Superman and Batman, Spider-Man, all this stuff, those stories have been written all the way since the 40s or earlier. And in order to fix like all the different artists, you know, or writers' interpretations of them, and to bring them in line, you know, because if you go back far enough, there are straight up war propaganda issues of DC Comics. There's one where they have basically racist cartoons or depictions of Japanese Americans with fanged teeth and stuff on that was made back as propaganda for war, where, you know, they're getting ready and we're fighting the Japs, and they're calling them as much in the comic books. I mean, like, there's just straight up racist stuff in them. So they have to kind of write that stuff out and get rid of stuff like that. Or, you know, when somebody gets, you know, like somebody that was alive in the 40s, when they're getting older, you have to make an explanation as to why Bruce Wayne is still in his is 35. You know what I mean? So they have to do that with these different multiverses, with these different planets. And that's what they do at the end of BioShock Infinite. The reveal is that Booker DeWitt, well, basically just walking you through the ending, it starts off that, well, the point that the ending starts off is that this, like, you've done it, you've killed Zachary Comstock. You're sitting there, you've fought off all of these, the Vox Populace are attacking with all these blimps, and they're coming in, they're attacking, they're shooting, they're trying to take you out. You manage to down them all, and then Elizabeth is standing there at the end of the ship. So you're going off to speak with Elizabeth, and at that moment, like, you had been controlling the songbird. Okay, so you've been controlling the songbird, and you've had it actually attacking other ships, and you had like this little sound, like this flute or something that you were playing to play the song for it. And she ends up, or you end up dropping it, and then you lose control of the songbird. And you know, at some point, Elizabeth becomes, basically at that very moment, she becomes Neo from the Matrix. At that point, everything, all of her powers click, and she becomes omnipotent, okay, or omnipotent, or however you want to say it. And she basically teleports you, the songbird, and everything to Rapture from the first BioShock game. And basically, you're inside Rapture from the original BioShock game. The songbird is outside underwater, and the pressure of the water destroys the songbird. And then now you're inside of Rapture. So she opens a trans-dimensional porthole and transports you and the songbird to Rapture from the first game, kills the songbird in Rapture, and then she walks and she leads you off into a door. So you walk out the door, and then now you're outside. Actually, you walk inside through Rapture for a little bit. Then you take a bathysphere up to the surface, and then you're at the original lighthouse, like right at the original BioShock. And at this point, you're kind of filled with all of this nostalgic memory and everything. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're bringing us to Rapture. Am I going to get to play in Rapture? And you get completely disappointed because you don't get to play in Rapture. But you're at the original game's BioShock, and at least you can see it in engine and what it looks like and everything. And I thought some of the stuff looked kind of janky. Like when you were looking out through the window, looking into the water, the cities didn't look all that textured well. They look kind of hokey, to be quite honest. But compared to the buildings in this game, like looking at the menu and you look at the detail and the brickwork and everything, and then compare it to what Rapture looked like, it kind of looks weird. And I actually might play that ending scenario at the end of this, just so people can see what it looks like. So you can see exactly everything that I've explained. But in any case, you see all that stuff, and then you're at the White House, and you get an explanation. She tells you that now I see what's behind every door. I see everything, all the different possibilities. And basically she says that there is always a lighthouse and there's always a little girl. So basically she's explaining that whole concept of a multiverse, that there are multiple dimensions that exist out there. And after she explains this, you kind of get to understanding that there are many different versions of her, there's many different versions of you. And through that process, you end up discovering that you are from basically another universe or another planet. And you were brought into this universe by the Lutesses. Or actually, to bring it back even before that, there's the reveal that she is your daughter, basically. She is that she is your daughter. Actually, that happens even before the ending, but there's the reveal that she is your daughter, okay? And you figure out that the reason that you have in your mind that idea of give us the girl, wipe away the debt is back when she was a baby, a Comstock from another dimension came to you and wanted your daughter. And your daughter's name was Anna DeWitt. That's why you have the AD carved in your hand that you carved there, because you know, after you sold off your daughter in order to pay off this debt you had, then this gambling debt that you had, you were horribly torn up with emotion over it, and it caused you kind of to basically what happened was you were so damaged by it that you kind of rewrote your memories whenever you traveled into this new dimension. So another dimension's Zachary Comstock, that is you. So, but in the other dimension, that Zachary Comstock came to your dimension, bartered with you, got your daughter, took her to that other dimension, and then raised her up as his daughter. And then now the Lutesses came, like whenever you were sitting there and kind of sulking for the fact that you sold off your daughter, they came to you in your moment of peril, and they offered you a chance at redemption. And then when they brought you to this secondary dimension, when they brought you over, you rewrote your memories in your mind that in fact you were there to get the girl, as opposed to the fact that you had sold her off and then you were back to recapture your daughter that is rightfully yours. So your memory was rewritten, you know, by yourself. Like in your mind, you rewrote your memories to change them and to be different. And then that's the reason that you were here, that all this was playing out, is because now you are here to get your daughter, who is Elizabeth. And because Elizabeth and Anna DeWitt are the same person. So you came to this new dimension, you're there to get your daughter, and then after this reveal and everything is spoken, like, or actually before you realize that you're Comstock, because that's the very last thing that happens, is that you realize that you're Comstock, you end up getting drowned by Anna DeWitt / Elizabeth and multiple different versions of her in a river. Now, this is meant to symbolize the fact, because there's something that's said in the ending, and it's that DeWitt wanted to kill Comstock at the point that Comstock was born. Because he says, like, because Anna tells him, or Elizabeth tells him, that it doesn't matter what happens in this dimension. There are all these multiple different universes and multiple dimensions. So even though you killed Comstock in that current dimension, which was the bad version of you, because you came from your dimension into this one, and you had killed the Comstock that exists here, it doesn't matter, because Comstock still exists in multiple other dimensions, just like DeWitt's exist in other multiple dimensions, and that it didn't matter. But then he told her, well, let's just go back and kill him. He's a baby, because in his mind, he's thinking about time travel, but he's not thinking about dimensional travel, like multiple different universes. So he's like, let's go back and kill him. And before she enters a door where she ends up drowning him, she asks him, are you sure you want to go in here? And he's like, yes, I want to go in. And he goes in, and then he finally figures out, oh wait, I am Comstock. And then she gets drowned. But none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. And I'm going to explain to you why it doesn't make sense at this point, okay? And you have to understand that you have two separate individual things going on here. You have multiple universes, and let's, for expediency's sake, let's say they're separate planets that are going on, and you also have time travel. Okay? Time travel is something that happens on one of those individual planets, and it takes you through the timeline of that separate and individual universe, but it doesn't cross over and touch or affect other different planets. Now, there is a point in the dialogue of the game where they do say that some of the memories of things that, like, let's say something happened in another universe. Let's say you killed a guy on another universe and then you took a portal into the next one, that there's some type of residual memory that goes over, and they can remember the fact that they died. And there's also parts during the ending where you see that your nose is bleeding and you touch your nose and there's blood there, and that's because you're remembering the fact that you died, because you end up killing yourself during the game. At some point you kill Comstock, who is you, and from another dimension. Is it confusing yet? Yeah. So you end up killing yourself, so you have that residual effect, but that doesn't explain the plot holes that exist that I'm going to go over right now, okay? So understand, when you're playing through the game, there are these separate planets that are individual universes, and there's also time travel. Those things are two separate, completely different things, okay? So when the main bulk of the story happens in one timeline and in one universe, but there is a point where they shift to the second timeline, or actually a second timeline and a second universe. And then they actually shift on that second universe into another timeline. Okay? But I'm going to walk you through it so you can understand it. So when you start the game, basically, let me go over some of the characters. Let's see. You have DeWitt / Comstock. Basically what you learn through the game is that DeWitt was a soldier that fought at Wounded Knee, which is a battle they had against Native Americans back in the day. It's actual historical battle. And during that battle, he was a war hero, but from the dialogue that you get in the game, you learn that either he himself started to enjoy the fighting or enjoy the combat, or he was fighting with other people that enjoyed the fighting and the killing and the slaughter of these Native Americans. And as a result, because like even one of the people that you meet, there's this one-eyed soldier that you end up meeting that I mentioned earlier in the other review, and he recognizes you, and he fought with you in this battle, okay, at Wounded Knee, and he said that you took a lot of trophies and you were just like this crazed killer and everything. So certainly DeWitt has some issues with that battle, with his actions and the things that he chose to do. So what basically that is his symbolic birth. DeWitt / Comstock. That is when Comstock is born, because depending on which universe, which planet you're on, DeWitt either chooses, okay, I'm going to get baptized, and then from that point he changes his name to Zachary Comstock, and then he goes off and he builds Columbia, and all that craziness ensues, or he just stays DeWitt. One of those two things happen on all of these various different universes that exist, all these multiple possibilities, you know, that all these different permutations that are possible that exist on various planets. So on each and every single one of these many different planets, as many planets as there are stars in the sky, all these different universes, there's going to be a choice that he makes right after the Battle of Wounded Knee, where he goes to a river and he either gets baptized or he doesn't. If he gets baptized, he ends up being Comstock. If he doesn't, he stays DeWitt. So as you're playing the game, you are a DeWitt. You have at that choice after the Battle of Wounded Knee, you have made the choice to not get baptized. So you are just there living your life. And what happens is, so you're on, let's say you're on the first planet, okay? Just so you can understand the timeline. You're on the first planet, and then somebody from a second planet, you from a second planet, after the Battle of Wounded Knee, decided to get baptized, and you became Comstock. That Comstock cannot have children. He is married to Lady Comstock. She cannot have kids. So he ends up getting involved with the Lutesses, and the Lutesses are the ones that kind of understand the concept of the time travel and using the portals and things. So they come back they go through a portal and they find you in your first dimension on planet 1. They go from planet 2 to planet 1, and they go and they contact you and they say, if you want to wipe away the debt, give us the girl. So as a baby, you give over Anna DeWitt to the Lutesses and Comstock of the second planet, and just as she's being pulled, like, you know, Comstock, or you from the other dimension, is pulling your baby girl through the porthole, and somehow you track them down and you're trying to get your girl back, but you're pulling on her, trying to get her from his hands, and just as the portal's closing, her finger gets caught in it, and that's why her finger got cut off, okay? But that's you in that first world, and then they took her to the second world, where in that one you became a bad guy, that you chose to be Comstock and you built Columbia. Okay, you understand it so far? So there's two separate timelines that you work, or two separate universes that you're dealing with. Okay, now the you from that first planet is now you're distraught, you're kind of broken down because you've just sold off your daughter to pay off these gambling debts to you from another universe. You don't realize that. You knew you sold her off, but you don't realize that it's another version of you from another universe that you sold her to. Now, in the second universe, Comstock at some point, which you find out through the game, ends up killing off the Lutesses. Okay? So he kills the Lutesses. So they're absolutely dead in that timeline. But the Lutesses still come back and get you and bring you to their second timeline. And this is where the story, it doesn't make sense, because the Lutesses went back to get you, but they were dead. Lutesses don't exist in your timeline. They don't exist in your world because you never became Comstock. The second world, they got killed. So where did the Lutesses come from? These Lutesses that are existing, they have to have come from a third planet. They have to have come from a third dimension. And if they came from a third dimension, or they came from a third planet, why aren't they, why would they come back? They would have no motivation to come back. The only motivation they would have to come back, the reason that the Lutesses came back to change history and time and space, is because Comstock ended up killing them. That's their motivation. That's their reason they went back, so that you could seek redemption and change things, is because Comstock killed them. They can't come back if they got killed, though. If they got killed, they're dead in that universe. They're dead. So what, these are Lutesses from a third dimension? And if they're from a third dimension, why aren't they bringing you back to deal with the Comstock from their third dimension? Why are they bringing you back to deal with the fact that they got killed? Which, I mean, like, they can't come back if they got killed. So at that point right there, that's a major plot hole. It's like, well, they can't come back because they got killed there. But let's say you want to, believe that, okay, even though they're dead, even though they got killed, somehow they still came back. Okay, so let's just skip over that plot hole, which is a major plot hole. But let's say that they're from that second world where they got killed, which, if you pick up all the voxophones, you lead, like, clearly, Fink was commissioned to kill them, and he carried that out, and he killed them off. And they got killed under the orders of Comstock from the second planet. So they got killed, but still they came back, and they basically gave you a chance to go back and to get your daughter. So they go back, they get you from your first planet, and they bring you to this second planet. So this is now a second universe. You're in a completely different universe. You entered through a portal, and you've gone to this other universe. So now you're there in this reality, and the reason it has to be a second universe is because you and Comstock exist within that universe. Understand that. You are being brought. Columbia doesn't exist within your universe because you never became Comstock. That's a decision you didn't make. So Columbia only exists in this alternate dimension, in this secondary planet. So you've now been transported by the Lutesses to this second universe, in this second planet, where your evil doppelganger became Comstock. And the whole mission is that they want you to come in here and get your daughter. And by getting your daughter, then you're going to prevent what eventually happens if Comstock raises her, which is she becomes this complete psycho lunatic bitch that ends up trying to firebomb New York City and rain fire on the world, because he raises her and turns her crazy, drives her crazy. So they bring you back into their world. So then that's when your game starts. That's how you begin the game, is that the Lutesses brought you back into that second dimension, and then now you're searching for finding Elizabeth. And at the moment that they did that, that's when your mind rewrote all your memories, and then you remember things differently. You don't remember things as, I sold my daughter to this guy, and then he dragged her through this weird scientific porthole. You remember the memory as these guys hired you to go find this girl, and you're just trying to bring the girl back to them. So that's when that change happens, and that's when you actually start playing the game. So now you're playing the game in the secondary timeline, okay? We've established that. We've also established that the Lutece's motivation for bringing you to the second timeline doesn't even make any sense, and that they wouldn't even bring you to the secondary timeline. They would bring you to whatever timeline they came from. They wouldn't bring you to, and they would also have zero motivation to bring you to that timeline because they would have never gotten killed. In order for them to have a motivation to bring you to the timeline, they would have had to die in order to give you them that motivation that would have then made them bring you. But if they die, they're dead, so they can't bring you there. So it's like at that, okay. But we're just gonna pass over that obvious continuity error and just deal with the second timeline. So we're dealing with the second timeline. You're there in Rapture, or not Rapture, but Columbia, and you're trying to find your daughter, or well, actually not your daughter. You're just trying to find the girl, quote unquote, Elizabeth, and get her because, as you believe, she is something that you have to acquire in order to pay off your debt, even though you've already apparently paid off your debt, and you're just going through the motions as the Lutece's plan is playing out to where you can actually get a reveal of who you really are. So now you're in the second universe and you're playing out. And here's, aside from the Lutece error, here's a second big continuity error. When you're traveling through this world and you have Elizabeth with you, you run into the guy that you met at Wounded Knee, which is this guy, the one-eyed soldier that you knew from Wounded Knee. In this story, you knew who he was, you recognized him, and he knew who you were. He recognized you. He, however, did not know who Comstock was. This is a major problem. The reason it's a major problem is this is a very old guy, right? He's got one eye as a soldier. You and him both fought at Wounded Knee, meaning he recognizes you as you look today, the young version of you. So he actually, he didn't fight at Wounded Knee with you. He fought at Wounded Knee with his universe's Comstock that at the time was named DeWitt, because you were off in a completely different universe. You chose not to get baptized. You were never going to be Comstock. You were just going to be a drunken private detective that sold his daughter, and he was in this universe with his version of you, his version of DeWitt, that then at Wounded Knee decided to get baptized and became Comstock. So he had fought with that person, and their age is the same. If you look at Comstock that you meet on that second planet, in that second universe, Comstock is an old man. So is the soldier that you met with one eye. Why, when he sees you, doesn't he ask you something like, why are you the same age? You don't look, you haven't aged a day. When you look at him, don't you say, wow, you look really old. Why are you so old? Obviously, what's happened here is not only did you travel to another universe, you also time traveled forward. So you switched universes, but you also went forward because Comstock in this game is an old man. The only explanation for Comstock not looking exactly like you is that he's older than you, which means you have to actually have traveled forward in time for yourself to be older. That's the only explanation for it. So when you traveled, when the Luteces grabbed you and brought you to this new, this second planet, this second universe, you're older there. Or the Comstock version is older there. So when you met this guy, this soldier that knew you from Wounded Knee, he should be commenting on the fact that you don't look like you've changed a day. You look exactly the same. But he doesn't say anything like that. And you should comment about something that, wow, why are you so old? But you just recognize the guy and you don't say anything about it. Obviously, when you see Comstock in the game, he looks like he's in his 50s or 60s. The soldier that you see looks like he's in his 50s and 60s. They look like about the same age. Why is it that he recognizes you from that time and believes that you're the guy that he fought with, but he's not thinking in his head, but that was, 30 years ago and the guy looks the exact same age? Why was he imagining that Comstock is actually a liar and not somebody that fought in the battle, but he believes that you are somebody that did fight in the battle. Why is that? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. Once you start looking at it and you lay it out there on the timeline, it doesn't make sense. So that's a second major error where the soldier, you know, like he recognized you as a young man because at Wounded Knee he fought with you as a young man. But he fought with that universe's Comstock, or that that universe's Booker DeWitt. He didn't fight with you. He fought with somebody else. And then that guy got older. He got older. So you should have been old, but you weren't. And that's another major plot hole. The third issue that comes in the plot is later in the game, you come to a situation where they do some after you either fight and kill that guy or don't kill him, and you go deeper into the game. There's a point where you're trying to find this guy that does gunsmithing, because basically you want to get out of Columbia. The only way to get out of Columbia is to get this airship. In order to get the airship, because the Vox Populi have started to revolt, and they've gone into open revolt in the streets. And the only way to get the airship is because the Vox Populi have seized the airship, is to make a deal with them. So you end up making a deal with Fitzroy, where you say, okay, if I can find this guy that you're looking for, this gunsmith, I'll go and get the gunsmith, and then he'll give you the guns so that you can plan your revolution. So they don't have the weapons for the revolution just yet, but they have the airship. So now you, as Booker DeWitt, again, you're in the second universe, the second line of continuity. You decide to go and to help this world's, Fitzroy. Okay, so you're going off, you're doing that, and when you go to get the guy, this Chinese guy, and you go into his gunsmith shop, you find out that this guy is dead. Okay, and the way that this relates to everything else is that dead is dead. This guy is dead in this dimension, just like the Lutesses in this dimension, which it clearly states through Voxophone got killed. This guy is dead in this dimension. So the only way that you can get these guns, you think, is by going through a porthole, and you end up finding another dimension where the guy is still alive. And this is why this, it relates, is okay, well, if the somehow the Lutesses, even though they're dead, they're still alive in this world? How does that work? Because the game clearly states that they're dead. Which then, that you get into all the problem. You reopen that can of worms with the Lutesses. It's like, well, if this guy is dead and he's dead for sure in this world, and he only exists in another dimension, then you're saying that, well, the Lutesses have to be Lutesses from a third dimension. So you basically go back and you open that can of worms. But let's just ignore that can of worms for now and deal with this can of worms. So the second dimension that you're on, the second world, where Columbia actually exists and everything, and you have your evil doppelganger here that's named Comstock and all this stuff. So you have to then go into another porthole. So now you've left from the second world that you're in, and you've entered a third one. And here's where stuff gets really crazy. So you started off in your original planet. The Lutesses took you to this secondary planet, which they should have never taken you to, because they were dead and they shouldn't have been able to come back and get you in the first place. So even if they were a third world version of themselves, they wouldn't have brought you to the second planet. But it's so confusing, right? And it's confusing because it doesn't make any sense. Okay, but regardless, you now go from the second planet to the third planet. All right, so now you're on your third planet. So now you've left the version where the Comstock is, and where your version of Comstock is, and you go to this third planet. And the way you know this is a third planet is because now there's a third DeWitt / Comstock there. Because once you enter that third planet, what happens is you end up going and you meet Fitzroy later, and in that dimension, DeWitt has already died. He died a martyr fighting for the Vox Populus. But DeWitt is you, and so is Comstock. So DeWitt died, which means there was one version of him. There's you, which is the second version, and then there's the third version, which is Comstock, who is still alive. So now there's 3 versions of you. The only way that there can be 3 versions of you in the same universe is if those were complete and separate individual versions of you that all converge into that one universe. That's the only explanation, according to the science that's presented in this game, that actually makes sense. So now you're on a 3rd universe where basically, and this has to be originally a Comstock universe. The reason it has to be a Comstock universe is that because Columbia exists. If Comstock and DeWitt had entered a universe that was a DeWitt universe, there wouldn't be a Columbia. The only way that there is a Columbia is if DeWitt at Wounded Knee chooses to get baptized and builds and becomes Comstock and builds Columbia. So you and your version of DeWitt and the version of DeWitt that got killed both entered into this same universe, and he got killed, but you're still alive. Yeah, really doesn't make a lick of sense, because when you start thinking about it, then you're like, okay, well, if he got killed, how did he get there? The only way he got there is if Luteces brought him to Columbia the same way that the Luteces brought you to Columbia, which now means there's another version of the Luteces that brought them there. And if there's another version of the Luteces that brought them there, where's the other version of your daughter, Elizabeth? Because she would be there too. And then therein lies the problem. It's like, this is a story that wasn't very well thought out. If you don't scratch the surface, if you just go along with it, it's okay. But the second you start putting a microscope at it, at the science of it, it completely falls apart. Now, you can sit there and say, well, you know what? Why are we discussing science? I mean, we're in a game that people can shoot fireballs out of their fingertips or crows out of their fingers, you know? Like, why are we talking about science? But in the same way that in comic books, that there is a required continuity and they have to go through and they have to fix continuity, there are certain standards that need to be preserved, and this story doesn't preserve these standards. But before I completely, go off on this, and now we talked about the 3rd issue that I've had, which is, this issue where once you travel to this 3rd dimension, nothing makes sense at this point. Because now you're at this 3rd dimension where there's 3 different versions of you that all exist. Now, this is the current one. So you're now in this 3rd timeline, and that's the one that you stay on until the end of the game. Well, actually, there's one other time travel leap that happens. But let me finish this up. Because that's not the complete list of problems. There's a few more. So let me talk about them first before I give you a retrospective. So now you're on this 3rd planet, right, where a DeWitt has died. You're now a DeWitt fighting this Comstock, which means what? Which means you left that 2nd dimension. So now all the resolution and everything that happens is in the 3rd dimension. So you're actually going to you're not going to kill the Comstock from the 2nd dimension, the one that the Luteces originally brought you to. Now you're going to kill the Comstock in that 3rd dimension, on that 3rd planet, if you stay there. So what happens is the story ends up almost merging those two, the 2nd and the 3rd one, together. And almost like saying, okay, well, no, you went back to that 2nd one. But it doesn't make sense, because how did you go back to the 2nd one? Because in the 2nd one, you still have 3 DeWitts. How can you have 3 versions of DeWitt if on the second universe. It doesn't make any sense. The only way it makes sense is if that DeWitt, oh my God, my brain hurts just talking about this. My brain hurts. The only way it makes sense is that if you actually travel to another universe where DeWitt had already existed and the DeWitt had gotten killed. That's the only way it makes sense. But they're still kind of merging the story from that third universe into the universe of the second one. They're like telling you that, okay, DeWitt came here, he got killed, and then that's when Fitzroy becomes a psychopathic bitch, and she's like, the only solution is you got to kill these, racist people. You got to kill their kids because they keep respawning, or they keep coming back in a new form, and then Elizabeth has to go in Solid Snake style through the vents and kill her. But basically, from that you have the DeWitt that got killed. You're the DeWitt, and then you have the Comstock. So you have 3 different versions of yourself that are existing in that universe. None of which makes sense. none of which that makes any lick of sense. But somehow they're still treating the narrative as if everybody is still dealing with one timeline. Somehow they're still telling the story as if everybody is just. Every version of every person in every universe is still cognizant of just one solitary timeline, and that nothing has really changed. So then you work your way past that point, past the point with the Vox Populi going crazy and going through the city and burning everything and blowing everything up, which is a completely different issue, but is very like suspect storytelling in the way that they had. They're touching on social issues, and they kind of just threw everything out the window there. But I'll come back and I'll talk about that later. Let's stick to this really insanely confusing timeline. So now you're on this third planet that has to be a third planet because there's 3 versions of you there, one of which that got killed. So now you're on this third planet, and as you play through the game, there's a point where the songbird shows up. Like, the songbird comes back, and the songbird's about to kill you. And in order to save you, Elizabeth jumps in front of, because the songbird's sitting there and he's got his big fist and his Wolverine-looking claws, and he's about to stab you in the face with him. And Elizabeth jumps out and she's like, no, don't kill him. I'll go with you. Take me back to your tower. So then the songbird takes her back to the tower. But not only does he take her back to the tower, he takes her through time. Because now at this point, what happens in the story is, and this is post Vox Populus taking over, post you taking out Fitzroy, or actually Elizabeth taking out Fitzroy. At this point, the songbird comes, he takes her. Now you just get thrust into another time period without any explanation. It just happens. Who changed the time period? How did this time period change? The only explanation for this, if you're following this story, is that they actually traveled through time. Meaning Elizabeth traveled through time, and something happened, and this happened because what happens is you get transported to a world where Elizabeth is now Comstock. Comstock is dead, Elizabeth is taken over, so you somehow get transported to an alternate world, or an alternate universe where Elizabeth has now fulfilled her Comstock's ultimate goal of making her this dictator. And as you play through this, eventually you meet the old Elizabeth, and she walks you out to this area, and you see her as she's firebombing New York City. So now you're in this 4th dimension, or an alternate timeline, but they don't explain which. So you either travel through time somehow, without Elizabeth's aid, by the way, or you got transported to another dimension, and they don't even bother to explain how that happened. All they do is take Elizabeth from you, but somehow you get magically transported to either a 4th dimension, or you get or time changes somehow. Even though the songbird took her in real time and then took her to the tower, And time changed? Why would time change? Why would that affect time? Because it doesn't make a lick of sense what happens there. It doesn't. There's no reason for it to happen. None. But it happens. So at that point, they just decide to change time and decide to stick you in an alternate timeline with this older version of Elizabeth that has become this psychopath. And then an even older version of Elizabeth, because you're in a timeline with an old Elizabeth that has actually been raised under Comstock's teaching, and you're like working your way through an insane asylum. And you gotta like kind of like, this is where you have a couple stealth elements where you have to kind of maneuver through, because there's this enemy that has a light on his face and he has big trumpets as ears. And if you go through and he sees you, he trumpets, and then all the insane asylum patients run and run at you, and then you have to fight everybody in this room. But they're all just like bum rushing you. So as you're fighting through this area, you can pick up voxophones from an older Elizabeth now, who's obviously been brainwashed by Comstock's teachings, and you're kind of learning about the fact that in her timeline that you never actually went and rescued her. You never saved her. So then she's now fulfilling Comstock's plans for the future, which is she takes over. So as you're going through this, you end up meeting the old Elizabeth, which is another Elizabeth. It's not your original Elizabeth that you lost. It's not this world's universe Elizabeth, because this world's Elizabeth is now a younger version, but still a dictator. Now this is a third version of Elizabeth that's now an older version of Elizabeth that is saying to you, hey, here's how you stop this from ever happening. Where did this Elizabeth come from? Why are you in this dimension or slash timeline with this other Elizabeth? How did you get here? Why? None of this is explained in the game. It's another huge, major plot hole in the game. This whole sequence. Again, if you don't think about it, you can just accept it. But if you start thinking about it, it's like a thread that's loose on your clothes. And once you start pulling on it and it starts unraveling, all of the story starts falling apart. And that's not the end of the major issues with the story. Now let's move on past this point. So basically the old version of Elizabeth gives you a little card that's got a bird cage on it and some scribblings. And somehow she also transports you back to your proper timeline where you can go and rescue Elizabeth. Why you went to this other timeline and saw this possible future, who knows? Never explained in the story. You don't understand. Why did this older version of Elizabeth from another dimension, obviously, because she's from a world where Elizabeth took over, why did she suddenly decide to come and talk to you? Who knows? You don't know. You don't have a reason for knowing it. Maybe the only explanation you can have is saying she is Elizabeth from your dimension in the future if you failed, and now she's coming back to try to help you. But then if you succeeded, she would never exist. She would only exist if you failed. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, regardless of what happened there, let's ignore this big, huge pothole and let's move on. So right at the end of the game, so now, and here's a very important point that we should also point out here. And we don't know at this point if we're on the third version of the dimension or if we're on the fourth version of the fourth dimension or what. But wherever they end up putting you now, which could be a completely different dimension, you don't know. None of this is explained in the game. Wherever you end up now, everything, like the story and everything, seems to be continual. So let's just assume we somehow got back to the second timeline, or the second planet's timeline, or whatever. Not that it matters, because none of this is making sense. But let's say we got back to, you know, our main story's timeline, the one where everybody seems to understand everything that's going on, even though none of it makes sense because it's a garbled mess. But let's say we got back to it, and you go and you rescue Elizabeth / Anna DeWitt, and you free her from your future, or not your future self, but this version of you from another dimension. So you're back in the second planet, the second timeline. You've saved your daughter Anna DeWitt, who you know is Elizabeth up to this point, who you basically sold to your evil doppelganger in this second dimension, who has taken on the name of Zachary Comstock. And you go and you rescue your daughter, and this is your daughter. This is your original daughter that got transported through the portal and has now aged and has now become this woman that you don't even recognize. You go, you rescue her, and now you're going after Comstock, aka yourself. So you go and you get into the room where Comstock is, and during the conflict, excuse me, during the conflict where you're fighting yourself, which it's really not much of a fight. You're just sitting there by a bird bath, and at some point he starts touching on Elizabeth, and you just grab him and you smash his head in on the bird bath and you kill him, because he starts trying to blame you. He's like, well, look at her finger. Why don't you explain to her what happened with her finger? And you just lose it. You lose your shit, and you end up smashing Comstock's head in and you kill him. Okay? So you've killed the evil version of you that existed in this universe. The problem with the game at this point is, okay, let's ignore all these other plot holes. At this point, why doesn't Elizabeth and you just leave? Go back to your original universe where he took you from, where he had sold you to Comstock into this new universe. Why don't you go back to that first universe where Elizabeth belongs, where you belong, and live happily ever after? Why? I'll tell you why they don't. Because they decide the writers of this story decided to end the story on a poignant note. So the poignant note that they decide to end the story on is that they're going to reveal in the last second, right as the game ends, that in fact you are Zachary Comstock, and then all of these multiple different universe versions of your daughter Elizabeth / Anna DeWitt end up drowning you in a river. None of this makes sense. The reason none of it makes sense is that all of those alternate versions of your daughter, they should be off murdering the version of their father that exists in their dimension. Why are they all converging on your one dimension? Why are they converging on your one planet to kill you? It doesn't make any sense. If there's multiple planets and multiple different universes, there's multiple different copies of you in them, right? Why aren't they going there and dealing with you in their own individual separate universe? No explanation, no reason. You want to know the reason? It's because the writers decided to end it on a poignant note. That's why. And they didn't do enough research. They didn't do enough continuity checking. And then that's why you have all of these giant holes and gaping problems with the continuity of the story, that once you start thinking about the time travel and you start laying it out on a spreadsheet or mapping it out, none of it makes sense. The whole story just falls apart. Okay? And if you're thinking to say at the end, well, no. If you're one of these apologists and you're like, no, you're wrong, and they already explained this, and they said that there's, remember that some of the people that you killed, you go to another universe and they have a residual memory and all this stuff, and that it's all, somehow this was like the DeWitt Prime, and if you killed this DeWitt, if they all these different universes versions of your daughter killed this guy, it was going to fix the problems magically from all other universes, which is some crazy bullshit science that is never talked about in the game, never mentioned, there's no reason why you should believe that, but some people are going to say, yeah, that's the reason that they killed him, is because, that's the way it is, and because they were trying to make excuses for the game. But let me tell you why you're wrong. You're wrong because I actually stayed for the end of the credits. If you play and you watch the ending, after all the names go through, they actually have a little acoustic guitar session, which is a behind the scenes showing of music that they recorded for the game and all this stuff. Then they have a scene. In that scene, so you have to wait. They actually do have an after credit scene for this game, just so you know. At the end, guess who's alive? The guy that just got killed. DeWitt is still alive. He's in that office. He opens, it's the same office that you always get teleported back to, like whenever you die and your daughter's not around or Elizabeth's not around. You get teleported into that little black and white office, the private investigator office, and then you open the door and you see the crib there, and he calls out and he says, "Anna, is that you?" And then it cuts off. So if in fact by drowning their father at that point, that was going to fix any Comstocks from ever existing, or not, you know, like wipe them all out throughout all the universes, why do we have that scene? If by killing him off, they're going to completely eliminate that, like, why is that there? And there's no actual explanation for it. There's none. They don't provide you with an explanation as to why that scene would be there. Sorry, I had to do something further. Sorry about that pause. But there's no explanation in the game why that scene would be there. If somehow there was supposed to be some magical resolution where by her and all these multiple versions of her killing their father, which all of these different versions shouldn't have converged on this one specific universe, because they should all have been dealing with their own, you know, the DeWitt that existed within their universe. They should be dealing with that one. The one that took them and rescued them from their particular universe, that's the one that they should be dealing with. So where did all of these girls come from at the end, and why did we have this after game footage of DeWitt? It's because that they didn't even commit to the ending that they gave you. They had an ending, but then they didn't even commit to it. They had the ending of, okay, well now they killed him and then that's a sad ending, but then they didn't even commit to it, because now they give you a scene where he's still alive and then he's coming in and walking in to see if his daughter's there. So it's just this jumbled mess. So at the end of the day, the gameplay is good. It's a fun game. It's got great graphics. But if you're buying into all this stuff, was the greatest gaming story ever told, and all this nonsense that people might be telling you, it's bullcrap. This is not. This is a very convoluted mess. This enters into very distinct Damon Lindelof territory. And if you don't know who that is, it's the guy that wrote Lost, or one of the writers on Lost, and one of the guys that wrote Prometheus. Yeah. It's really that bad. It's really that confusing. Okay? It goes complete, it jumps the shark cleanly. Okay? There's not even a question. It just gets it gets so crazy and nonsensical at the end there that it's not even a question. Again, if you turn off your brain, like any great action movie or something, if you turn off your brain completely and you don't think about it at all, you can ignore all that and still have a great time. But if you're somebody that is really into the science, and you want, well, not even into the science, but into storytelling, and you want everything to wrap up and to resolve and to make sense, and you want it all to intertwine and connect, this doesn't. They have way too many continuity errors. And the game doesn't even stick to the science that they're creating within the game. And that's a problem. Now, am I saying that BioShock Infinite is a bad game as a result of it? No, it's still a good game. But I'm examining the story as a separate individual part. And the thing is, the problem is, if you sit there and if we as gamers, or we as journalists or commentators sit there and blow this game and give it this, ridiculous amount of praise and ignore all the faults of it, what do you think you're going to get in the next BioShock? What are you going to get in the next game? If nobody actually speaks up and says, hey, there is a problem here. You made these errors and you should fix these. And this is therefore a problem in story. We're not going to get great story. You know, what do you think stories like, you know, the TV series The Wire or TV series like Breaking Bad or The Shield or something, where do you think all that comes from? It's because there are writers that see flaws and see problems, and they're really cautious or really smart about wrapping everything up and putting a nice little bow on it. And that's when we get great stories. And I know things like this can happen because, you know, there are television shows that cover time travel and things and dimension hopping and things like Doctor Who that don't run into these same major errors. Okay, you can do short stories even in a short amount of time and tell these stories so that everything wraps up. The problem is they tried to do too much. They did too much hopping around, and they didn't have enough people watching the continuity, and things got ahead of themselves. So when it comes to the story elements of BioShock Infinite, again, if you turn your brain off, you'll be fine. You know, just like a big, like, and look, I'm not saying that as an insult, because certainly when you watch like these big, you know, like martial arts movies, 90% of them, there's no story to it. But I still love that stuff. You know, I still enjoyed my time in BioShock Infinite. I still enjoyed the game overall, but you can bring more story to it. You can add more story, and it becomes an even richer experience. It becomes a deeper experience. So again, that's why I have my feelings of wait for this game, because really, I beat it in 18 hours. It cost $60. The story has a lot of faults. Should you pay full price right now for it when you can buy it later in the year for a lot cheaper, for $20 less? Why do that? Wait to the Steam holiday sale, and you're still going to be able to experience the game and get all of its glory. But of course, you know, if you're listening to this, you already purchased this more than likely. You've already played it more than likely. You already built up your own opinion of the game, and you're just here listening to what my opinion of the game is. So there it is. BioShock Infinite, great game visually, has a lot of inventive and interesting gameplay, but I felt it could do more, and I felt it fell short in the story aspect. And now let's talk about one thing that I said I was going to talk about, which is the social problem, the social issues that it was going for, that it kind of just dropped. And my problem with this is that in a lot of ways, BioShock Infinite is groundbreaking. And it's groundbreaking in a good way, which is like, I never want to badmouth this game, because I think this game is going to be one of those games. It's going to be a timeless game because it tackled social issues in a new, interesting way. It started talking about race, which no other game that I can think of has ever done. Now, they've done it in a way where, like, the X-Men talks about race, where it's like the X-Men are actually a symbol of, you know, the political tensions they had, you know, back in the 60s and early 70s with the race wars and things that were they're going on in America with the issues, you know, the civil rights movement. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. But the X-Men are kind of like an example of that, because they're saying like mutant instead of black, you know what I mean? That's what they're doing. They're just tackling, and they're taking, instead of Hispanic or black or any one of these different minorities, they're saying mutant, and they're giving them special powers, and they're like showing that kind of conflict with a different context. But this is a game that actually directly touched on those things. It actually talked on race. It actually talked about different racial categories, and it actually presented racism. It actually did it. It went into it, and it showed a level of maturity that a lot of gaming, or none of gaming, has really done in this. So in that way, it's a very groundbreaking game. The problem then comes in the fact that it didn't really stick the landing. It just kind of, it started off, and it was presenting this this social conundrum, which is like, okay, well, you are playing the game as a white male. You don't really know what race he is. You don't know if he's a minority, if he's not a minority. You know he's a white male. That's all you know about him. And you know he fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee, so he obviously didn't have a problem killing Native Americans, but that's about all you know about Booker DeWitt. when you're playing through the game, you make a choice. Like early on, they have a very poignant choice that you end up making, excuse me, where you basically choose, where you're at this town fair, and you basically, they're having this raffle for for baseballs, and when you win the raffle, you can throw the baseball, and you can choose to, like, they parade out this interracial couple, you know, it's a black woman and a white guy, and they're parading them out, and they have these, like, you know, these cardboard cutouts of monkeys that are coming up, and they got pictures of the monkeys with the men's bowler hat and the women's bridal thing on, and they parade them out, and you're supposed to throw these hard balls at their face, or you can choose to throw it at the guy, the promoter there. And then that's how you're first introduced into that's when the crazy starts happening. That's when the killings start happening. That's when all the nuts, the crazy things in the game start happening. And they also show later in the game, they show some abolitionists. They're printing up abolitionist material. And there's actually a hidden area in the game that I got to where you can break through a skylight and you end up going into this guy's house. And he's like, the guy you meet there actually says a little dialogue, and he says, "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm a moderate." And there's things like that, but they don't really expand upon it. They talk about it. They show little glimpses. When you get to Finkton, you see the poverty and the squalor that people are living in. But the way they resolve it is that you end up going to this other dimension where the people that are fighting, the people that are rebels, just are as psychopathic and as killer as the people that they're fighting against, which then it leads you into this weird place. And I mean, I know the guy that wrote this didn't intend it to seem racist, but in a way it ends up like, well, what is your message that you're trying to tell? Because you started off, you were showing this tale of morality, and you're presenting the morality to the gamer and giving the choices to them. But then it's like, well, the way you portrayed it, it's like, well, this black woman that's trying to fight for her civil liberty, is this now suddenly a psychopathic killer that's going to kill children? Is that, and that the Vox Populists are just mass murderers and they went through the streets and killed everybody? Is that what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that people that want to fight for their civil liberties, if you fight for your civil liberties, then you're now the as evil as the people that you're fighting against? What kind of a message are you sending? And that's a problem for me. I feel like, well, they just made it like, okay, well, both sides are equal. And actually, if you look at both sides, the racists come across looking better than the people that aren't racist, because the racists had created at least a racist utopia where, you know, like everything was nice, but when the minorities end up taking over, they just like slash and burn and kill everybody, and everybody's dead. They don't even bother enslaving people; they just kill them off. They just run through the streets. They're killing men, women, and children. You know what I mean? Like, what are you trying to say here? And the social message completely gets dropped in favor of crazy, and I think that that's a major issue. Again, I don't want to badmouth the game because I think it's really bold for making the choice to talk about those issues. But the fact that it didn't stick the landing, that it didn't explore that, where it didn't give you more chances to make a choice of, are you going to be a racist? Are you going to be a sympathizer? Or like what? And ultimately ended up, they're just trying to tell a story in a bottle. They're just trying to tell the story of you, Booker DeWitt / Zachary Comstock, and your daughter Anna DeWitt / Elizabeth, and how that all pans out. And that's the story they wanted to tell, and the backdrop just kind of got lost in the mix, and with all the other time travel and dimension hopping and everything that went on. And it just ended in such a way that I don't know, like what's going to come of it. Now, fortunately enough, the game has 3 pieces of downloadable content where it can expand upon that, where it can tell new stories, where other things can be explored. Another actual, it's not so much a continuity error as a big question mark, is once you get to the ending of the game and you realize, okay, this is your daughter, where does she get her powers from? Why does she have special powers? You don't apparently have any special powers. Who is her mother? You don't learn any of this in the game. So there's never explanation anywhere in the game. And understand, I picked up all the voxophones. I explored all the side content. I know this to be a fact. There is zero explanation as to how she got these powers in this game. Where does she get the powers? Where does she get them? How can she find chairs and open them and change reality? And, you know, and another issue is that, like, at one point in the game, like when she's dealing with Lady Comstock, she says that she can actually, like, her mind can affect the reality. Like, she can change it to bend to her will, you know, which is why I say she's almost like Neo in the Matrix. But at the same time, she also states that there's separate individual dimensions and all of these different that are based on probability. So it's like, well, it's either one or the other. It's like either there's all these different dimensions, or there's one dimension that you're affecting with your mind. Which one is it? And there's no clarity there. So, and also, where did you get your powers from? Because in the game, the only thing that they explain in the game is that there's a siphon, which is the whole tower that she's locked up in is some type of a device, a device that's meant to drain her powers. What is it draining her powers for? Again, that's never explained. It's just explained that there's a siphon and that they're trying to control her will, the same as that you control a dog with like an electronic dog collar and make her do what they want her to do. But they don't really explain, okay, well, if they're draining her powers, what's the power that they're draining going to funnel? What is it? What is it? You know, are they building the Death Star? What are they doing there? They don't explain any of that. So certainly there's a lot of room where they could try to tie bows on this, where they could try to go back and fix the convoluted story. But I just don't see them doing it. I think probably more than likely with the way it ended, they're going to end the Booker DeWitt / Elizabeth story with what happened there, and you're probably more than likely going to be dealing with completely separate and individual characters within the same world, which is fine by me because I think that they mucked up the continuity so much as it is that they should just go with separate stories. So there you go. There's my spoiler-rich review of BioShock Infinite. Again, just getting back to it, I mean, I think overall it was a great game. It's definitely a game that has been bold, and it's again, just to make this point when talking about the social issues, I think it's a game that has really broken ground in a very interesting way, and I want more mature stories. I want games to feel like that they can tell about stories. I think earlier this year there was this big fuss about, oh, Tomb Raider is telling a story and Lara Croft might actually get, somebody tried to rape her in the story, and is this going to happen? It became this big buzz, and then it turned out it was nothing. It was just a guy that tried to grope her, and she ends up killing him. But games should be able to tell these stories. Kids should be able to die in games. Everything that you see in movies, everything you see in television should be able to happen in games, because the level of maturity of the people that are playing the games is just as old and just as mature as the people that experience these other forms of media. And I see what has happened in BioShock Infinite with the introduction of these concepts as a good sign that that's what we're going to get eventually. So on that level, again, I give the game points, and I think it shouldn't be bad mouthed for its attempt to try, but the end result of where it ended up was kind of left flat because it didn't really make a statement one way or the other. Not that the game has to make a statement, but the fact that it touched on these issues, it should try to have resolved them in some way other than just everybody's crazy on both sides and just toss its hands up and not even say one thing or the other. But anyway, that wraps up my review of BioShock Infinite for the PC. Again, this is a PC-centric review. I haven't played it on any of the consoles. I don't know how to play it on the consoles. The only thing I've heard about the consoles from other people is that they definitely don't look as good as the PC, which, you know, come on, the consoles are like pushing 5 years plus, so that's a pretty obvious thing. Obviously the tech isn't there for them to look as good. But if you're going to get the game, get it on PC, and in my opinion, wait till it's cheaper. Wait probably for the holiday Steam sale. It'll probably be around $40 or so, and that's when you should pick it up. But you should definitely play this game. You should definitely experience this game. Obviously, if you're hearing this part of the review, you probably have experienced it already or have played it at least to some point. and you want to see how things resolve, and definitely get to the ending and see it for yourself. Actually, can I actually have everything saved on here. I could show you the ending, but actually I'm not going to do that. I'm actually not going to do that. The reason I'm not going to do that is because if I put the ending here, they can actually flag the ending and say that, get me to remove it. I could, let me just load it up. I'll just load it up just to show you that I actually got to it. So, play game. And continue. And I'm just going to load it up. I'm actually going to play through the ending. I'm just going to show you. You can see I'm at the sea doors. This is the end of the game. So you can clearly see that I'm at the endings. And near the ending, for all those that have made it there, you take a bath, escape, and you end up at Rapture. Yeah. This is Rapture from the original game. Looks pretty damn good. Bath escape, not so much. This the green texture on there looks kind of 8-bit. I don't know what's up with that, but yeah. So that's going to conclude my my review of BioShock Infinite, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Once we were here, I could fully control it. I thought...
What is that?
It's a key.
Where did it come from?
Hold on, I'll just let the sound finish off.
I just couldn't see it.
Okay. So this is 1-bit, and this has been my BioShock Infinite full review, part 1 and part 2. Full spoiler-free and spoiler-rich. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support my channel, the way you're going to support my channel is by not skipping my ads. Watch the ads all the way through. And like, thumbs up, subscribe. Later. Love this starry sky. It's pretty awesome. Bye, guys.